I believe that Yah is looking for people who are ready to enter into his kingdom today. Are you ready? Hi, this is Barry Phillips with 10-Minute Torah, day number 2 of Shelach Lecha. And let's continue with the story of the 10 spies, the 10 tourists they were supposed to be. And when in actuality, there were 12 men that were sent in. 10 had one agenda, 2 had something completely different in mind. Let's talk about this. So these men are sent up into the Negev. They're sent up from the south to go into the land. Moshe says, take a look around. What are the cities like? What are the people like? How are the mountains? What is there sown in the land? What's going on? And then he makes this request in chapter 13, in verse 20. He says, whether the land is rich or poor, and whether there are, in this particular translation, the scriptures translation says, whether there are forests there or not. Some simply say trees. The Hebrew word here is etz. It references a tree. Trees. Now, what is it that about trees that Moshe would be interested in? Well, obviously, wood for building, wood for firewood, wood for structures. But I think there's something else going on here that is more basic and elementary to our discussion. A tree is the symbol of a Sadiq. A Sadiq is an individual who has achieved a high or exalted level of righteousness in their walk. This is the individual that when you need a prayer answered, you're not just sending out on a prayer call to a long list of people. This is the person you call because you know that when they pray, something happens. This is the person that if you were to be alone in the wilderness with one, it's not their survival skills. It's not their ability to find the plants that you can eat. It's their relationship, their walk with the Most High. This is the person that if you are in dire need, you want them to come see you and help you. There are a few of these people in the earth, but they have this ability, such as Abraham. And let's consider him. Abraham was approached by none other than Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh in a manifested form. And I think Bereshit chapter number 18, if I'm not mistaken. And he is told, I've come to look at the cities of the plain to see whether the cry that has come up out of them is legit or not. And if so, I'm going to destroy them. Abraham begins to intercede. By his righteous influence, Yah says, I will spare the city if there are 10 Tzaddikim in that city. The cities of the plain, Sodom and Gomorrah, could have been saved if there were 10 Tzaddiks in those cities. There were not. There was only one. And even the great Tzaddik, Abraham, living in close proximity, was not enough to save them. So there is a righteous environmental influence. Yah is looking at cities where there are men and women of high exalted status, and he recognizes these cities can be averted judgment because of the righteous influence of these people. There are some places there are no righteous influencers, and they're given to destruction. Consider some cities in our country right now. Something to think about. Moshe was an enormous Tzaddik. The quality of his walk, the ability of his walk. And he was asking, are there Tzaddiks or Tzaddikim in these cities? If so, if a city is under the influence of a righteous man or woman, or multiples thereof, then that is the city that we will bypass. We won't attack that city because righteousness can prevail there. In their absence, they're open to destruction. Consider also that the greatest Sadiq that has ever walked upon the face of the earth is our Messiah, Yeshua ben Elohim. Yeshua was led into the wilderness for the same time period as these 12 men toured the land, for 40 days. And in the wilderness, Hasatan himself came to Yeshua, seeking to dilute and to divest the status of Yeshua's righteousness, seeing if he would turn to an alternative. This is the same level of temptation that we find with Adam and Chava in the garden. Would Yeshua eat from the wrong tree? He appealed to him. He appealed to his hunger. He appealed to his individual mind about whether he would want fame and recognition or not. He tried to get him to slander Yah by jumping off of the pinnacle of the temple and daring to trust him for a phenomenal feat. Yeshua rejected all of these things. And so we understand then that Yeshua, having rejected these things, only increased his Sadiq status, if that was possible. But here's something you have to keep in mind. You see, we like to think in our Western mindset that if my righteous status is this big, then the evil capability of me should be only about that big. The Hebraic mind says, no, if your propensity for righteousness is this big, then your propensity for evil is the same size. Your propensity or capacity for good and evil are balanced. So one might consider Adolf Hitler a man of extreme evil, enormous capacity for evil. But if he had been a righteous man, how much great work and righteousness he could have produced in the earth. Let's turn that going around. Moshe, a man of an incredible amount of righteous potential. But if he had been an evil man, if he had continued under the auspices of Pharaoh and remained in Mitzrayim, how much evil would he have done? And how foolish for someone like Korach, that we'll be studying about a little later on, or these people and this Torah portion, when they stood up against such a man and tried to provoke him to wrath and to anger. If Moshe had unleashed his capacity of evil on them, Israel would not have survived. Now, how much Yeshua, if Hasatan could have gotten Yeshua to turn, the overwhelming capacity of his righteousness, the world cannot understand, the world cannot measure. That could have been used for evil. And darkness would have engulfed the earth, and man would have ceased to exist. What is your capacity? What is your mindset? What is your ability before him? So these men were found out in their evil capacity when they went into the land. They found out there's giants in our inheritance. What are they doing there? There's still giants in our inheritance. There's giants of unbelief. There's giants of mistrust and slander and accusation. There are other countries, there are other peoples in our land, or at least are trying to attack our land. There are nations that will line up against our inheritance. There are giants everywhere. The problem was these men failed to see themselves as righteous in the eyes of the Most High and only saw themselves as grasshoppers. They came back fearful and afraid. Here's something else that's very important. When they got back, the people were waiting on them and had been doing so for 40 days. Were they packed? Were they ready? Were they just awaiting the word, let's go? And they were all assembled, packed up, ready to be mobile, ready to believe, we're going into the land, this is it, this is our opportunity? No. They weren't prepared. They didn't want to be prepared. Because their capacity for evil, their capacity for the flesh, had overwhelmed their capacity for righteousness and walking in the Spirit. Are you packed and are you ready to go? Or are you still making provision for the flesh? More on these things tomorrow. Until then, shalom.